I think it's easy to say that February this year was a goldmine for the games industry in more ways than one. Because it was so packed, I thought it was best to make one video going over everything rather than make individual videos on every single topic specifically. A fair warning, however, in the instances of things like the Pokemon 30th presentation, I won't be covering every announcement that was highlighted in those showcases. Just for the sake of pacing and my own personal preference, I'll be focusing on the big stuff that stood out to me. If you've been following this channel at all over the last month, some of this may sound like retreading old ground, however, I'll do my best to condense anything that's getting repeated to spare those of you the trouble. Early on, and potentially the least exciting thing to happen this month, was the partner showcase for Nintendo. Games shown were for both the Switch 1 and 2, however, nothing truly jumped out for folks, as most of these games were things that were already announced and we all already knew about. It's just, hey, look, now they're coming to Nintendo! So, for anyone who dedicated themselves to only that system, that's great, but for the rest of us, it's kinda, okay. I mean, we got things like Resident Evil 9 and Pragmata along the way, which, that's exciting, just not mind-blowing. However, there was a Bomberman collection announced which sparked a little humble crowd of their own. And speaking of which, there was one other noteworthy announcement that goes into our next bit of news. Console archives became a thing. Cool Borders and Ninja Gaiden 2 were dropped on the Switch 2 and PS5 right after the showcase, and if you're familiar with the Arcade Archive series, this is now Hamster Corp's take on retro consoles. While I've already covered Ninja Gaiden 2 and Cool Borders previously, as of writing this, the third and newest game to have come out is Dezaemon. Released on the 19th, giving those of us in the West a taste of what a do-it-yourself shoot-'em-up game looked like from the 90s. I've played all three of these of course, though Dezaemon being the new kid on the block, I'll focus on that for now. The game is straightforward enough in what it sets out to accomplish, however I do wish if there was any one game Hamster Corp took the time to fully translate, it would have been this one. As we've had games before that release with minimal translations applied, specifically looking at the Mazinger Z arcade game that came out a couple of years ago. And while the pause menu does give you a full explanation on what everything translates to, it does make me a bit sad that I have to study a manual before I can focus on the creative aspects of putting a game together. And that's before considering any quirks about using a sprite maker from the Famicom. For instance, I often found myself fighting the sensitivity of the cursor while trying to make anything, thus leading to a number of smaller blemishes in whatever I was doing. Which is further making my next problem all the more prominent. As far as I was able to tell, there's no quick undo button. I'm sure anyone with the time and patience to familiarize themselves with Dezaemon can showcase this game at its best, but that unfortunately isn't me. Moving on February 12th, we got Sony's first State of Play of the year, which blew the partner showcase from Nintendo right out of the water. Beast of Reincarnation got showcased in this presentation, which is a new action RPG by Game Freak. Based on the footage, it looks like it's going to be something in the vein of Astral Chain, where you and a second character fight your way through environments that surround you with hostile creatures hoping to get the better of you. It looks very nice, and I hope it does well upon launch, because I know a lot of the discourse surrounding this links back to Game Freak's output regarding Pokemon's performance with Generations 8 and 9, but more on that later. But at least to say, I'm hopeful for what they can accomplish here. Alongside Game Freak, Motion Twin surprises out of nowhere with the return of the Castlevania series. For those who don't know, these are the guys who made Dead Cells back in 2018, which had a delightful Castlevania expansion added to it in 2023. I'm willing to guess whoever at Konami that gave them the okay for that project thought they did such a bang-up job that they were given the blessing to make the full entry into the series, giving us what will be known as Castlevania Belmont's Curse. This was easily my highlight of the show, as it's been 12 years since the last game. With all that said, there is plenty more to dig into from the State of Play. One second we're getting hit up over the head with Marvel Tokon news, the next we're getting Volume 2 of the Metal Gear Solid collection, and so much more that it's insane to me what we have going on here in the not-so-far future. Even crazier is that only 4 days later, we got the announcement of Hack Zero from CyberConnect 2. For those unaware, this was a multimedia RPG franchise that bloomed in the days of the PlayStation 2. It of course went into hibernation near the end of the 2000s as Namco held the rights to the IP and had other plans, despite CyberConnect themselves having a desire to keep it going. As it turns out, Bandai Namco extended the olive branch and let the folks at CC2 manage the project entirely of their own volition, according to the game's website. I can't begin to express how excited I am for this and what other form it ends up taking, as this is something that stopped me dead in my tracks upon its announcement. Like, I didn't think there could still be a game that could get me this worked up upon its reveal. I thought that's something that I had moved on from emotionally to the point I thought it was impossible to get this kind of reaction out of myself like that, and just, God, I love being wrong sometimes. On a less optimistic note, not long after Hack Zero got announced, Xbox then had yet another crazy shakeup as Phil Spencer stepped down as the head of the Xbox brand, and his protege left the company with him. I'll be brief, because this isn't the brightest bit of news that I get to share. I don't know what's in store for Xbox going forward. It's to the point now that I'm reluctant to buy anything related to the brand anymore, and I say that being an Xbox guy myself. Ever since they raised the price of the Series X and S last summer, and then raised it again in October that exact same year, something was clearly wrong. I don't see the point in expanding my library on that console anymore, and my heart goes out to anyone who doesn't have another ecosystem like Steam or Nintendo to fall back on, should a worst case scenario take place and everyone's digital libraries through Xbox get wiped from existence. To bring things back to a positive note, however, we did end the month on Pokemon's 30th anniversary, which gave us a variety of news and announcements of little doodads sprinkled in and out. We got a Game Boy music player as our first big reveal during the showcase, which is a cute idea, though outside of collectors having it for collection purposes, I can't think of anyone who would actually use this. I feel like had something like this come out in the early 2000s or even early 2010s, I would have been the child hopping up and down on my kneecaps for this thing. Modern tech being the way it is, with Nintendo even having their own dedicated music app, the practical use feels absent. Like, I feel like this is only for those who just really enjoy their share of whimsy in Pokemon. There was also the usual onslaught of news regarding things like trading cards and spin-off games. However, the obvious star of the show was the reveal of Generation 10, with Pokemon Winds and Waves being the final announcement. My feelings towards Pokemon had been a little hot and cold since the 3DS era myself, as for every game that got my undivided attention, there was another game that just simply didn't. The fact that we're getting a mainline game that looks this promising after the discussions that surrounded Generation 9 especially, I think this was an incredibly smart move on Pokemon's part to focus on visual flair rather than go over all the individual gameplay features for now. It looks like the folks over there took the criticism from Scarlet and Violet to heart, and when it came time for the Switch 2 to get a game out there, they knew what they wanted to nail down this time around. That about covers the news I wanted to highlight for this video, but I did want to end things on a casual note of some games that I've been currently playing. On some of my socials, I've of course mentioned that I've been playing Yakuza Kiwami 3 lately. I thought I'd be done with it by now, as I'm a huge fan of the series despite some of the rather noticeable rough patches that the community's been through over the last year. That said, I am finding the game fun overall. I'll of course elaborate on those feelings in a dedicated video covering the game at a later date, just know I'll be 100%ing it before any of that happens. Aside from that, I've been playing Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate with some friends of mine lately. None of us are particularly familiar with how classic Monster Hunter games work, so the gameplay you're about to see is what that entails.
I don't know how to. I don't know how to do things. This button. Oh, there.
Why are you squatting?
I don't know how to do things. Leave me alone.
Bro, I don't know what you got yourself into, man. Like, you showed me friendly fire. It's kind of cooked from then on out. You hear that, Zach? Your life is under the materials he's about to gain.
Dude, this controls, because you can't lock on, is so bad, dude.
Pinnacle, as Brian says. Hey,
Kill
Brian,
time. Understandable.
Brian, why don't you come to the center of the room and see what you have done to me? Look
Where
at how
are
hurt
you?
me.
Man, odds?
Look, he has abandoned me and I am weeping.
Why do I have that?
You're matching it. You're matching it. I'm watching you. I'm watching you. I'm literally watching you do it.
Matched. I'm running into the wall. I'm not mashing.
He's looking at you.
Oh, I'm trying it. I'm stuck in an animation.
You chose a really funny spot to one of mine, bro.
He was on the opposite side of the map, bro. I was trying to get on. God, dude, he lunged into me.
Lastly, I've also been playing the Pixel remastered version of Final Fantasy I. This was a game I started around the launch of the Switch 2 last summer, but because there was so much in that first month to chew on, it quickly became a game that after about a week, I put it down and only came back to like once in a blue moon. What I like about this version in particular is that you're able to alter the money and EXP values that enemies drop, which greatly speeds up the pacing of the overall game. I think I put about 5 to 8 hours into this version before realizing that that was even an option from the get-go, funny enough. Least to say, out of the many times I've started this game and gotten a decent ways in without finishing it, I'm glad to have a means to do that in a reasonable span of time. Not because I don't think the combat isn't any fun or anything like that, rather just, after a while you kinda want to see the big notes and move on. Reaching a number threshold in of itself isn't difficult, it's just time consuming, so if you can trim that a little bit, that's a good time in my book. Maybe I'm crazy for that, but hey. With that, I've about covered everything going on in the realm of games at the moment. If you watch this to the end, thank you as always, and I'll be sure to do more videos like this in the future. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then, everybody.